Good morning, Mark. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Jer.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's beautiful over here.
That's great. Glad to hear it. A little rainy here, but let's dive right in. Article that we're going to go cover today involves reducing the risk of cognitive decline. A great article that says eating mushrooms may reduce the risk of cognitive decline. We can link to the article that we dive into the study if you want to go into the more details. But I just wanted to tell you why this caught my attention and what was curious about it to me. So, of course, I'm of middle age now, you could say. I've got small kids now. Between work and kids, everything pulling me in different directions. I'm starting to feel the stress of being pulled in too many different directions, and so I wonder if this is a phase, if the kids are going to get up to the age of school and everything's going to go back to magically perfect productivity like before, or I wonder maybe I need to worry about cognitive decline. I mean, I do feel like I'm young to be worrying about that, but the seed has been planted, you could say. So I see this article and I think, do I need to increase my mushroom intake? That'd be easy enough to do. So tell me, like, what did you see in this study?
Well, first of all, I just want you to know that I can totally empathize with how you're feeling. I mean, I actually kind of have sort of been there and come back again. Most of our listeners probably know, viewers probably know that I spent from June of 2016 to July of 2016 in a severe funk of cognitive decline due to toxic mold exposure. Couldn't read, write, speak, relate. I thought my life was over, and it was a very very dark time. So there aren't probably that many people who've been there and come back who can empathize with your fears of wanting to avoid the tragic ending, right? Because I mean, what would there's I can't think of anything worse than the fear of developing dementia early or even late, and not being able to be there to care for and protect your loved ones. In fact, they have to be there for you to care for you and protect you. That's not how you design your life, or not being able to even feel your sense of mastery and contribution and enjoy your golden years and everything you built. That's that is a justifiable fear, and a lot of people are afraid of that. So you aren't alone, and I certainly can empathize because that put a real bee in my bonnet, which is one of the reasons why I founded this company as a doctor formulated supplement company, because I was super interested in food and nutrients that might specifically end cognitive decline, starting with mine, right? I mean, that's kind of where this began. So I feel you. So let's dive into this study. So this was a 6-year study from the National University of Singapore, where they found that seniors who ate more than one serving of mushrooms twice a week were half as likely to develop mild cognitive impairment compared to those who ate less than one serving per week. So what's a serving? A serving is 3/4 a cup. So basically what they found was that people eating 3/4 a cup of fairly common mushrooms were 50% less likely to develop mild cognitive impairment. That's pretty cool, and it was cool enough to be published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease here pretty recently. I should probably define mild cognitive impairment for people. This is the stage of cognitive decline that does not impair everyday life activities, but does impair your perception of yourself, and can also be measured. This is the important part, can be measured on standardized neuropsychologic testing. So there are subtle memory loss problems, forgetfulness, and changes in language, attention, visual spatial abilities that can actually be measured on neuropsychologic testing. So this was a cross-sectional association study, and while association does not prove causation like it would in a randomized placebo-controlled trial, it still had a strong enough signal to be very interesting. There were 663 Chinese seniors over the age of 60 living in Singapore between 2011 and 2017, and basically they used food frequency questionnaires combined with neuropsychologic testing to come to these conclusions. And what they found is that the result, which was a strong signal, 50% reduction, was independent of age, gender, education, cigarette smoking, alcohol consumption, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, physical activity levels, and social activity levels, all of which we know can impact mental function. So independent of all of that, so all that was controlled for, still a 50% reduction in mild cognitive impairment compared to people who were eating less than 2 servings of mushrooms. So that's a very strong signal after all that was controlled for. And the other thing that's amazing about this study is that they were not using special mushrooms. No trendy mushrooms like lion's mane, which we know increases BDNF, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like miracle grow for your brain, important for synaptogenesis and nerve growth and stuff like that. No, they were using commonly available varieties. They're eaten every day in that region of the world in reasonable amounts. So golden mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, white button mushrooms, as well as some dried and canned mushrooms. So nothing special going on here, and this is very encouraging that a commonly available single ingredient could have a dramatic effect on cognitive decline. So naturally, the researchers were interested in what compound here is doing the heavy lifting, right? Is there something we can isolate? And yeah. So they did come up with a good candidate for what's doing most of the heavy lifting here, and it's called ergothioneine, or ET for short, which I love. What a great moniker, ET. I think of ET, right? You know, so if I eat mushrooms, I'll have a brain as big and mushroom-like as ET, right? So this ergothioneine is a unique antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compound which humans are unable to synthesize, but it's found in food, especially mushrooms. And the reason the researchers felt that this was probably responsible for a lot of the effect was that previous studies had shown a correlation between mild cognitive impairment and low ET levels in the blood, low ergothioneine levels in the blood. And that's exactly why they did this study. They said, well, this is interesting. MCI is high in this group and ET levels are low in their blood. What foods contain ergothioneine? Ah, mushrooms. Well, let's do a study on mushrooms then. And so this is really the follow-up study. But the thing is, though, there are other compounds, even in these common varieties, that also have protective effects on the brain. And they have all kinds of exotic sounding names, like Greek sounding names to my ears, like hirosinones and aracinones and scabrinones and dictophorenes and things like that. And these may promote the synthesis of nerve growth factors a lot like BDNF. And then there are other compounds in mushrooms that may protect from neurodegeneration simply by inhibiting the production of beta amyloid and phosphorylated tau, which, if you are familiar with the literature on Alzheimer's disease, you know there's a very strong association between those garbage proteins in the brain and the development or exacerbation feed-forward cycle that leads to Alzheimer's disease. So it's probably more like an entourage effect of the whole food, because in nature, we usually find nature functioning as a symphony without a lot of solo acts. Of course, the researchers do want to do a randomized placebo-controlled trial. In order to do that, they'll have to isolate the ET, the ergothioneine. And that would be really interesting, and I think it's totally a great thing to do because it could be useful, it could be marketable in its own right, and especially for people who hate mushrooms. And I know a lot of people who hate mushrooms, right? So if there was a single compound we could pull out that did, you know, I don't know, let's say 75% of the heavy lifting, that would be a win. So mushrooms is food, mushrooms is medicine. I say yes to both. The path forward is not as daunting as it seems. It's only 2/3 a cup twice a week. That's doable. Maybe throw in some supplemental lion's mane while you're at it. So there are ways to avoid the tragic ending of dementia, and mushrooms is just one of those ways. And so we're finding out more. Yeah, it's one of those ways. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, well, and then it seems like it's such a simple thing, or like in a week, find a way to work that in. It makes me wonder, like, all right, well, if there is a entourage effect, what else can I add to my weekly routine? Like maybe should I add a after lunch walk during the workday or something? And so that's the next question that comes to my mind.
Yeah, and that's a great question because it turns out, you know, there are all kinds of lifestyle factors that are important. I tend to think, I like to put my lifestyle factors in 5 broad categories or 5 buckets or 5 domains: food, movement, sleep, stress, connectedness. And this idea that body care is brain care, because as the body goes, so goes the brain. You know, if you think about it, the brain is really downstream from all the metabolic effects of the body. We tend to think of it as being the master controller because it sits on top and sort of above, floating above everything. But if you look at the plumbing, if you look at, it's downstream from everything the liver's doing. It's downstream from everything the heart is doing. It's downstream from everything the gut is doing. It's downstream from all the muscles that are exercising and the things they're doing for it. So the brain is sort of the butt end of the joke, and the joke can be a good one or a bad one. And so body care is brain care: food, movement, sleep, stress, connectedness. So your intuition that taking a walk might help is absolutely true. There's good data out there, fantastic data, that exercise, particularly vigorous exercise, stimulates the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which we just talked about. Miracle grow for the brain. So that's just one thing. Plus, vitamin D turns out to be really important, having hormonal trophic effects on the brain as well. So if you're doing your exercise outside and you're getting some, strong lux, that's a measurement of light intensity, on your skin, and you're producing up to 10,000 international units of vitamin D in the space of 20 to 30 minutes of full spectrum sun exposure, that can have huge benefits on your brain. So yes, 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 and yes. There are many ways to avoid the tragic ending of dementia, and we're just really starting to understand this. And I'm actually really excited. I think there's just so much here: food, nutrients, movement, sleep, stress, connectedness. We can just go down the rabbit hole and have it be meaningful now in our lives.
That's great. Well, thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome.